So I'm going to start off and talk to you about my favorite thing from Build. And actually, it came from a long before Build, .NET Aspire. Has anyone used this yet? 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Okay. So I'm going to ask you, what is it good for? And I'm going to show you that it's actually good for absolutely everything. All right. So my name is William. I'm a solution architect at SSW, .NET MVP as of March this year. So I'm still figuring out what that really means, but awesome. So you can get hold of me on Twitter or X. I've got a blog that's severely out of date. One day I'll get that back on track. So azuregems.io. And if you want to have a chat, find me either on X or LinkedIn. Started coding a long time ago, if you know what a Spectre Video 328 is, back from the Commodore 64 era. But started doing it for real with 3D game dev in C, C++ in 1999. Jumped over to .NET 2 in 2006. .NET 1, what's this crazy fancy tech from Microsoft? It's not going to last. But V2 came out, been hooked on it ever since, and pretty much built my whole career on that. Similar sort of story with Azure, and every day I get to play with a bunch of cool tech and keep trying to add to that list. So you can see Aspire is already on that list. Now, what is .NET Aspire? So in the definition from the website is that it's a opinionated cloud-ready stack for building observable, production-ready distributed applications. It doesn't mean just microservices, and I'll show you why as well. Now, before I jump into just demos, tell you a little bit more about it. So it provides tooling, and whether that's in Visual Studio, VS Code, or the .NET CLI, you can use Aspire there. Now, you just have to go to the docs page to figure out how to install it, but it comes out of the box as Visual Studio. VS Code and the CLI, it'll start working if you install the workloads and the extensions. But, so big part of it is orchestration. So a distributed app means it's usually more than one application or more than one service that you have to run to orchestrate them. Which one starts first, which one starts second, third, etc. And then usually has some sort of dependencies between each other. So Aspire, using C# as the language, helps us then orchestrate how our applications start and what applications relate to which. And I'll show you what that means via code shortly. It provides us a sense of components as well, or the capability to add components to our distributed application. And a component could be something like a entity framework or Postgres database. There's a whole ton of them already from NuGet, so you just install some of the Aspire.hosting and Aspire. I think there's another one called provisioning, I forget. And then you can choose from a lot of components already. The list has just grown significantly since they started Aspire. And a big thing that you get out of Aspire as well is the observability locally, right? So most of this is for your local dev experience. So when you run one app, that's okay. You can check the console output there, get a couple of bit of information from it. But when you have 2, 10, 15 or more things running locally, observing this microservice ecosystem or distributed application ecosystem on your local machine is quite hard. Aspire brings all of that stuff together for us in a nice dashboard, and it's just improved the local dev experience, all the way up to 11. So it's all in this one fancy dashboard where you see the resources and the details about them, the logs, the traces, which I think they were surprised when they released this, how happy people was with us. The feedback was phenomenal. And in fact, they actually meant for Aspire to only deal with a local dev experience. They really didn't think about making it or putting it in charge of deploying your applications to Azure. We get metrics as well, but we'll talk about that shortly. The big thing that I get out of this is that one click starts everything. If you think about a distributed application, you start your SQL container, make sure it's healthy, can your application connect to it, and can that Azure function reach it as well, and can it receive events? And there's a lot you have to orchestrate, get ready before you can start running a request and hopefully debug it. Now, Aspire helps to get all of that stuff running on your machine very easily. So you can run projects in your Visual Studio, or code or whatever from a solution. You can run other executables on your computer, not just Visual Studio projects. You can run containers, because pretty much anything now in Aspire runs as a container. but they've sort of abstracted that part away, or given you the ability to say, just run a Redis or run a Postgres. It takes care of starting up the containers or pulling them and starting them for you in the background. You can even run bicep templates from C#. What the? We'll see how that works. Oh, and one of my favorite things to use these days is Dapr. All right, Dapr is also a big intersection with Aspire in terms of building microservices and components. So they're very similar types of tech, but Dapr is actually really, really hard to start on your local machine. But using these two together, it makes Dapr so much nicer to use as well. Have you tried it yet? You have? Yeah. It is all right? Yeah. Okay, so let's do some demoing. So hopefully you can see this. All right, so I'm not going to try and code this all from scratch. I've got it already. But you can't see that stuff on the right-hand side easily, so I'm just going to fix that real quick. This happens when you swap themes at last second. Yeah, I'm going to make everything nice and big. If I can see the right thing. There we go. Oh, you have to choose a font and everything. Okay. Not part of the demo, but it'll be worth it, I promise. There we go. Okay, can you see that stuff on the side now? All right, and we'll make this code a bit bigger. So, in short, I've got a number of projects here on the side. So I've got just a contracts library. I've got an orders microservice, products microservice, and a shopping cart microservice. So I'm building a little e-commerce application. And each one of these is just a standard ASP.NET web application, right? So when we start this up, we have a web application crate builder, right? All very familiar with this. Now, before Aspire, you didn't have this service defaults thing. What this is, from the .NET team, they spin up this service defaults library that adds in health checks and resiliency, a few basic things that they think are sort of sane defaults for adding to your application. So it's all about telemetry, your health checks, service discovery. So the nice thing is that if you have 2 or more microservices, it takes away the headache for you needing to know the host name and the port and all that of how these 2 services or all the other services have to talk to each other. You just give it a logical name. So in this case, shopping cart, products, and orders. You just talk to http://orders, and Aspire takes care of the rest. That's the service discovery. So you don't have to worry about host names and anything anymore. And there's extra resiliency and things you can add in here, and you can extend this. They also add the metrics that you can get from your application. We'll dive into that shortly. So that's the service defaults. So the way that you get the tooling to work is if you have just a standard project. I'll add a blank one here real quick. And we'll add a new project. And when it decides to load up. So on a web API, I'm going to call this, I don't know, just call it shipping. Because, now normally this little option should be enabled, but for some reason it is not. So I can't click it, but that's okay. So using the preview of Visual Studio, you're expecting a couple of bugs. But when you right click, whoops, not that. So you see here, right now, there's nothing unfamiliar here. It's what you get out of the box normally. So web builder, and then we've got app that after we've built. But if you then want to add Aspire to it, you can click add Aspire orchestration support. We'll just ask you a little question there that's going to update your code. Yeah, sure, do it. And when it does, it magically inserted this call here to add service defaults and map default endpoints. So health check endpoints and so forth is added in here. You can look at the code that it adds to your app, and that's it. That's all it does. Now your app is hooked into Aspire. And what comes along with Aspire is the app host. App host is really where everything starts. This is the orchestrator. What you saw before, what you normally have is a web application builder. This gives you a distributed application builder, okay? And this is where we can literally add anything that our application needs via C#. So I'm starting off by adding some Azure provisioning. I've got to just say, read my Azure location or region, and I've got a bicep file. So I want to have a storage account available to store my photos or pictures for the products. and you can provide parameters to your code. All right, if you're familiar with how Bicep works, you've got some input parameters, and I can provide them via my app host, and I can even read the outputs from my Bicep file as well. Sweet. And I can reuse that output for other purposes in my app as well, further down somewhere, right there. So I'm actually adding that to my app here as an environment variable. Now, I'm even adding Dapr, and I'm creating, running an executable to start up the Dapr dashboard. All right. You haven't seen any of this running yet, but I'll run it pretty soon. Then I need Cosmos DB, and it reminds me to start my emulator because I rebooted. And I'm running a Dapr state store backed by Cosmos from a Dapr definition here, component definition. Okay, and I'm enabling PubSub as well. I'm adding SQL Server. Now this one, I can run a SQL container locally, but when I publish this app to Azure, I say when you publish to Azure, they've got a little shortcut or extension here is to publish it as an Azure SQL PaaS service, rather than spinning up another container in container apps. Okay, then again here I'm adding a project. So here's my products project, which is inside of my solution, that one there. Okay, whoops, let's go back. And this is a bit of magic. Like if you F12 on this, you'll see that somehow it discovered where that project is on my hard drive, and it links to the CS project there. Cool. And because it just uses that for figuring out what config to put where, and then we can say what our application needs. So I'm adding the Dapr sidecar to it and determining the protocol, whether I'm running locally or whether I'm being published, and just adding a few references to other components. I need access to the PubSub. I need a reference to the SQL database. And so that SQL database, sorry, I should have shown you here. It's just a reference to when I have the SQL server, I add a database to the server, I get a reference to the SQL database, and I can add that to my product service. And inside of my product service, I'm actually, where is it gone? It's hard to realize that you can stop being able to read when you're on stage. So this is one of those components for Aspire. You don't see the NuGet here, but instead of having to do what we normally do to hook up a SQL server to Entity Framework, now we just get this component from Aspire. So when Aspire runs, it automatically injects the configuration to this products application. You see here that logical name, SQLDB. That's the name I gave it up here when I created the database, and it wires up everything for me. It's all done. It's very cool. So then you can have access to your database or your products DB context as per usual. Don't do this in production, please. It's bad. But everything else you can see here, I'm injecting here my DB context. I'm just using it and it works. Okay, same for all the other services. I'm just wiring up a bunch of dependencies, and then at the end I'm saying, let's run it. So theoretically, if everything's started up, let's start this up. It'll start provisioning a storage account because I've got a Bicep running there. It's going to start Dapr. It's going to start a SQL Server container running locally, and all this, the 3 other services that I added. Oh, 4 actually, because I added that shipping one. Okay, give it a moment, and ta-da! Here's the dashboard with all of that stuff running. So if I had to do this with Visual Studio, multiple startup projects, and running containers separately, starting Dapr from the command line, you can see here's an enormously long command line prompt to start Dapr. Yeah, I don't want to do that manually. I might script it out, but hey, Aspire takes care of that for me. So you can see here, I've got a SQL an Azure storage running. I actually provisioned it beforehand. I forgot to clean it out. You'd see the logs here from the Azure CLI deploying that storage account for us. But with all the other apps, we've got here the ability to see the console output for all of them as well. You can see here, if you've run a .NET app with EF Core and it's spitting out all the logs, that's all there. If you look at the structured logs, so if you use something like seek, etc., you get sort of a similar thing out of that. So when you look at one of these commands, you can see all the information that was captured in that log entry. So it's kind of cool. So you can start digging down into what was going on in your apps. Now, I guess I should really just run one of them to generate some telemetry, right? So it knows which endpoints are available for each app. And theoretically, I should still have some data there. So if I'm trying this out, cool. Yeah, I've got a banana in my product catalog. Not bad. And if we go and look here now in the traces, I can just whittle that down to my product service. You can see here is the request for get products, right? So if I look into that, we can see that we have a trace. It talked to the SQL database real quick. Now, this should be live. So if I F5 and do a couple of other things, try it out, execute, it should be there. No, the second one appeared here. There. So same sort of thing. When you have a lot of services talking to each other, it actually goes and captures the traces across all the services. So it's pretty cool. Metrics, the last thing. So you can go and have a look. Let's pick the one I used. So you can look. Oh, there's no metrics available just yet for some reason. That's new. Normally there's something there by default. All right. Imagine some cool graphs. Okay. Now, hot reload, all that stuff usually works quite well if you're familiar with that. Unless you're using Blazor, then it's not so awesome. Hopefully someone fixes that one day. For instance, here's the other thing I ran, an executable. So I can actually open up the Dapr dashboard as well. So it's there for me to use by default. And other dashboards, other pages that you need, like your health checks UI and whatever, you can start NPM. You can run Angular, React apps off Aspire as well. So it can orchestrate them for you. It's pretty cool. So with that, really, what I want to say is it is for everything. You can run Aspire and it can orchestrate anything for you. Now, it's not directly responsible for your deployments, but it produces a manifest file. So all that C# code that we saw in the app host, that will turn into a nice JSON file that you can use the Azure Dev CLI, AZD, to then go and provision all the resources for your application. It'll know pretty much about everything that you can add via that C# code. The AZD team takes that manifest, figures out what you need to deploy to Azure, and by default, one of the best choices is Azure Container Apps, but there's another open source project called Aspirate that can then take that to Azure Kubernetes for you as well. So it's a great fit to run your microservices there. Now, the easiest way to generate that manifest file, .NET Run, you choose the manifest publisher, just give it an output path. And then once you have that manifest file, just imagine it's describing a service, a resource, and some configuration settings, and it knows how to pass the configuration from your SQL database, for instance, into your application. So to use, to deploy all that, you run AZD login, make sure you initialize AZD for your project. If you have a lot of subscriptions, make sure you provide the subscription ID, and then it's just as simple as running AZD up. And this is what the output might look like. So it goes AZD init. When it picks up the code is running a .NET Aspire app, they'll say, hey, we know how to deploy this to Azure Container Apps. And you then enter in a resource group name or environment name, and it then just goes, cool, everything's ready. Now, when you're ready, you can run AZD up. And when you do that, the deployments actually start happening. And you can see, you can see here that it ran to completion and deployed those 3 services of mine into an Azure Container App environment. Now, doing it the better way, slightly harder way, is that manifest file. You can generate a bicep file out of that. So it's a much more complete one that describes all the infrastructure that you need, but you can then go and harden that even further, which you should be doing for a serious production app. If we want to add your private, your VNets and private endpoints, all that sort of more advanced functionality or requirements that you can't do via Aspire just yet. So this is the harder but better way to do it, get your application into production. So it gets you some of the way there, not all the way. You still have to do the rest of it yourself. So in summary, local dev experience is great. What I'm going to show you is that you can set breakpoints between the different services, and it'll stop in whichever service needs to, because Visual Studio is still attached to .NET Aspire and all your apps as well. So The service discovery, the debugging, observability, everything is awesome. The orchestration, it literally can start anything, including all the Dapr stuff. Deployments gets you most of the way there. And it's not just for microservices. So even for a monolithic app that needs a SQL database and a RabbitMQ or Redis or anything, I would still use Aspire. And it's just a massive productivity boost. And with that, thank you very much. You can grab the code on the QR code there. And yeah, thank you.